Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the MBA Games. Thank you for attending this webinar. Just for the MBA Games participants, please write your name correctly on the Zoom so that we could give you participation points. Today we have Stéphane Hamel with us to share his thoughts about the future of marketing. Stéphane Hamel is a program director in digital marketing at FSI Laval, but also an outstanding consultant, a speaker, an entrepreneur, and a teacher in digital marketing and analytics. He has contributed to the digital marketing industry by creating the digital marketing analytics model. Stéphane, thank you for being here with us.
For sure. Yeah, my pleasure. When you asked me if I wanted to talk about the future of marketing, I thought, oh yeah, super cool. I can talk about that for a long time. But then I sat back at my desk, and I wondered, okay, what am I going to talk about? Because there's just so much to say about the future of marketing. In a way, marketing hasn't changed that much. You see, I have gray hair, so. I actually lived before the web, which kind of makes me sound very old. But really, I started working on the web when it started like 25 years ago. I was lucky to work on a research project on the internet before the web existed. So I saw the evolution of marketing on the internet or the web. So I thought, oh, okay, there's a lot to talk about. But at the same time, I don't want to simply tell you, the future is mobile. People have been saying that for 20 years, or TikTok or WhatsApp or Facebook, or maybe a social media that doesn't exist yet. Maybe the future is Parler that we talked about these days because of Trump and what's going on in the US. At the same time, I didn't want to do a lecture. So let me share my screen right away before I forget. And let's start with, I don't want to make a lecture. I want it to be, I will do, as I always do, share my thoughts, my passion, and maybe be a little bit controversial. So that will just make the presentation more interesting and hopefully spark some questions at the end. So the first question I want to ask is what is marketing really? We can have a simple definition of marketing. I took the one from Philip Kotler that dates back almost 50 years ago, and he said there's some variation, but you'll get the gist of it. Marketing is the science and art of exploring, creating, and delivering value to satisfy the needs of a target market at a profit. So there are some very important elements. There's the science and art aspects that are super important. Of course, marketing is always very creative, but we see today that there's a lot of science and technology involved. The other part is delivering value for the customer, for the needs of a target market. And the last aspect is, of course, at a profit. So there's the notion that profit, if there's no profit, it's not worth to do any kind of marketing. So you really do it because you want to make more money. I wonder, let's I have a couple of quick polls. So let's start with the first quick poll where I'm asking, do you think this definition by Kotler still makes sense today? Great, I see the results coming in. Okay, that's good. So it's almost like the 80-20 rule, where most people believe that, okay, I will end it now and share the results. Okay, so it's almost it's 80-20 really. It's 80% of the attendees think that yes, it still makes sense today. It holds to the definition of 50 years ago, which is great. Um, so back to the presentation. Um, well, I told you I would be a little bit controversial. So my experience, especially my recent experience, let's say from less than 10 years ago or even less than 5 years ago. Um, so here's a little bit of controversy for you. I think marketing has always been about trust and influence. That's obvious. But now with big data, machine learning, social media, uh, in a way, marketing has become more of a game of manipulation and deceit, even with the power of destabilizing democracies. So all through the presentation, I'll make my point about that, and I will lead you to some interesting tidbits of information and thoughts about that. So why am I saying that? So well, take take Facebook for example. It's probably one of the best example to make my point, and I will use it for the rest of the presentation. But this really could apply to other social media and even without social media marketing in general. Um, so of course I use Facebook. I probably use it too much. I have a kind of a love-hate relationship with Facebook. I always think, especially when it's the start of the year and you want to make a resolution, oh, I'm going to get off of Facebook, or it could be other social media, but especially Facebook. But I keep getting back to it, and I keep getting into conversations and stuff, which is great. And there's a lot of positive things about Facebook, of course, but there's also the power that is in the hands of a few big players. Mark Zuckerberg decided that he wanted to boot Trump from Facebook. It doesn't have to go through a committee and regulations, and he can just wake up one morning and say, okay, I'm sick and tired of it, so let's kick out Trump. So that tells a lot about the power of the platform. So this picture was actually taken when Barack Obama participated into a town hall meeting with Mark Zuckerberg. So you get the president with a CEO of a big company doing a town hall meeting, which is fine because it's a way to communicate and convey a message. But I think this picture reveals a lot. So you see that Facebook is blurred in the background; it's always there, but you see the adulation. So all the people you see with their hands up, those are all journalists trying to take the best picture, the best shot of this conversation. So I think there's a lot of adulation of Facebook. There's a lot of power into it, and it obviously it influences our daily lives and also influence politics. Which brings me to the next point, which is I don't know if you've seen The Social Dilemma. It's documentary but fiction at the same time. It's pretty interesting. If you are into technology and marketing, you need to see this movie or documentary. Um, but they make pretty harsh comments about Facebook and other social media. Um, for me, it wasn't a surprise because I've been into this world of internet, web, and marketing for over 25 years now. But for ordinary people, for people in my family and friends that are not living in an internet or digital bubble like I live, um, it was a shock. It was, they never really realized how much power those platforms had. What they didn't realize either is that things that are there to allow us to express our opinions and comment and everything, they always start with a good intention. They always start with something, oh, let's make the thumbs up because it's going to be a great way for people to interact and express what they think. But it turned out into a way of influencing the algorithm that will later on feed the marketing aspect of Facebook. So obviously, people started to trick the concept of the thumbs up in order to have better results. Because in Kotler's definition, the reason you do marketing is to make a profit. So we already see that there's something getting positioned so that we feed the beast, we feed the machine in order to improve so that Facebook can offer good marketing reach and good marketing click-throughs and good marketing outcomes, and it works. But in order to do that, they collect a ton of data. So um, this way of collecting the data and tweaking the algorithm and influencing the algorithm is super important. So there are two big lessons from the social dilemma, and of course there are some critics. Of course, Facebook and Twitter and the other ones responded to the social dilemma, saying no, 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 this is not the way it works, and so on. There's some give and take, but largely what the social dilemma describes is really what is going on. And they interviewed people who actually worked at Facebook and Twitter and so on. And so those are the people who actually made it happen. So there are two big lessons. One is that when you do something, initially it's done with good intention at heart. You don't wake up in the morning saying, oh, let's go and do some evil. So there is this aspect of creating something out of genuine goodwill and interest, and to make it easier and better and so on, which is great. But then it can be used in different ways that you didn't intend, that you didn't know would happen, and then it goes into the wrong direction, or it goes into the evil side of things. The other thing that we need to realize is that our mind is very, very fragile. We receive those signals. Those studies that says the number of marketing messages and ads that we see on a given day, whether it's by driving on the highway or seeing a commercial on TV or listening on the radio or surfing the web. We receive tons and tons of marketing messages and brands signals that at the end of the day influence our choices, our decisions, and the way we live. So we need to keep that in mind. This social dilemma was actually produced because of something else that happened 4 years ago. And I'm talking about Cambridge Analytica, probably something that you've heard about, probably something, if you haven't heard about it, I will share with you some, I would say, exclusive knowledge that I have about the story. So Cambridge Analytica, Christopher Wiley worked for a firm called Cambridge Analytica. If you haven't heard about it, you probably heard the name. So it turns out that Cambridge Analytica was able to actually influence the democratic process of the US election and Brexit and so many other things. And I will show you how they actually did it. So we know what happened. Trump got elected. So obviously Cambridge Analytica was working very, very closely and was financed by the same people who were financing and influencing the Trump election. So it looks like it worked. It worked for 4 years, and when we know the outcome now. So let me share my own experience regarding Cambridge Analytica and Christopher Wiley. Um, I'm a data nerd, and I've been working with data for 35 years. My very first internship was on a research project to analyze the health data of people and finding patterns and making correlations and making recommendations based on those data sets from people who were hospitalized and stuff like that. So I've always worked with data. Um, so when I first heard about the capabilities of Cambridge Analytica, I was amazed. It was like, wow, it's a marketing dream. Um, but it turned out that Cambridge Analytica was probably the first, or at least the most visible demonstration of what happens when data is abused at scale, at such a big scale. So in 2016, before the scandal and when millions of dollars were poured into political marketing campaigns, and since then, the Facebook and Google and so on have actually changed the rules so that you cannot do political marketing campaigns the way they were done in 2016 because of this scandal. So everyone in my network was really ecstatic and was talking about this super cool firm and who's working there and what they are doing exactly, and it was very secretive. And the people, I actually did a presentation where I had like 1,500 marketers in the room, and I asked them, if you could work with 87 million rich psychological profiles with tons of attributes in order to optimize your marketing campaign to sell chocolate bars or t-shirts or whatever, and your goal, you work with data scientists and you develop a super effective targeting model and the campaign works, would you say no? And of course, probably 80-20 rule, most of the people in the room raised their hands and said, yeah, of course, it would be super cool working with a lot of data, creating, using machine learning and creating, all those targeting elements. It's a dream job for anyone working in data and anyone working in marketing. That's great. So everything is cool. So actually, this guy, Alexander Nix, was the CEO of Cambridge Analytica. There's actually, you can actually see his presentation. That was done in 2016, before the big scandal. And you can, I'll share the link on YouTube where you can see his presentation. It's amazing. So what he's talking about is what we call the ocean model. So let me explain what it is and how Cambridge was able to do what they did. So let's start with something simple. On Facebook, those little games and surveys and polls where you can find out which Game of Thrones character you are and stuff like that. So there was a little game like that. It was called My Digital Life, and it was more of a psychographic questionnaire. Do you like to be with a lot of people, or are you more of someone who prefers to be lonely, for example? So questions, typical personality profile. So about 320,000 people played that game or answered the survey, and the result of that, at the time, it was possible. And the way Cambridge Analytica was able to get My Digital Life on Facebook is because they played on the name Cambridge. So the fact it's called Cambridge Analytica and not whatever else, they leverage a brand that is very well known, which is Cambridge University. So they positioned it in a way that sounded like, oh, this is academic research. So it's fine, we can do it. And Facebook at the time allowed the application to actually ask permission to see your comments, your likes, your profile, your pictures, everything, but also that of all of your connections. So already there, you see that from 320,000 people, you end up getting all of that information of all those people, and you end up with 50 million profiles. So for a lot of them, you have the psychographic survey answers. And for other people, like the friends, you just have the profile. But if you extend that with the likes and the comments they made and the pictures they shared and everything, you have plenty of data to play with. So you have 50 million profile. So bringing that into the Cambridge Analytica data model, and we're talking about big data, we're talking about machine learning, and we're talking about developing targeting model. So in the end, they created, combined with the Ocean model, the Ocean algorithm, in the end, they actually created profiles for something like 230 million people in the States. So that's 2/3 of the population of the United States. They had profiles about those people. And in the States also, one of the differences is that, well, at the time, still today in the States, but it's much more regulated in Canada and in Europe. In the States, you can actually combine, if you have a name and an address or a couple of information, you can actually combine with election data, and you can combine with tax income data and stuff like that. So when we talk about the psychographic aspect, we also extend it with financial aspects and healthcare aspects and all kind of information. So it's very, very rich profiles. And of course, they use that in their marketing campaigns to target people and influence them to vote for the Republicans or Trump himself. So you might ask, okay, well, what I just described is pretty much how any ad network function. That's how they do it, regardless if it's Facebook or if it's any other ad network. They collect the data from somewhere, be it just the way you navigate on the web, be it because they have access to your Facebook or Instagram profile or any WhatsApp profile or any other profile. And they combine it with as much information as they can. They crunch that into targeting models. And they use that when you do your campaign on Facebook and you say, I want to target this kind of people that have those interests and so on. This is how they do it. So what's different? What's the scandal with Cambridge Analytica? What's the real problem? The real issue is that through this level of effectiveness, the problem is not that they were able to collect the data, because that's how it's done. Well, since then, Facebook has changed the way they allow application to collect data and so on to try to restrict that, but still, it was possible at the time. It was not illegal to do it. Is it because they had very smart data scientists? No, everyone wants to work with smart people. Is it because they were very, very effective at targeting? No, because if we look at Cutler, the idea is to serve a market at a profit. And instead of selling t-shirts, they were selling an election. So what's the problem? So the real problem, in my opinion, the real problem is that people found out about it. People heard how sneaky and how the extent of manipulation, they were the target. And they realized that they fell for propaganda. Because when we're talking about politics and elections, and especially in the US, there's a lot of propaganda. So people realize that they fell for. Otherwise, if they didn't know it was going on, everything would look just as regular. All of the election candidates were investing tons and millions of money in order to reach the right audience, target the right people, and change their mind, or at least influence what they were doing. So I mentioned the ocean model a couple of times. So the model actually was this idea was stems back to about 100 years ago, but it reached the current status in 1980s. So it has nothing to do with Cambridge itself. It's not something new. It's a model of a psychographic model that can be developed by asking a couple of specific questions, like I mentioned. And so studies have demonstrated that, well, the predictive ability of the model can be discussed, can be debated, but it has proven to work in political science. So that's why Cambridge used the model, but the difference is it was the first time it was used at such a scale, but also combined with other types of data. So that's where it comes from. So let me give you two examples. So if you take those two dimensions, and the answer would be very strong in those positions, the targeted ad that people would receive would be, oh, the Second Amendment isn't just a right, it's an insurance policy. So they play on the fact that you want to protect yourself. And you see the picture is a thief entering a house. So you have a right to bear arms and defend yourself. So it's an insurance policy. So they play on that because they know from the psychological profile that this is the trigger. This is the little thing that will make you vote for a Republican or for Trump, because those were selling points. But if you pick someone else where the psychological profile would be very, very low on the openness, so it's someone that is close, more conservative, and then high on another dimension, maybe the ad they would get is from father to son since the birth of our nation. And now the picture is, oh, a nice sunset and father and his son going hunting. And again, the message is defend the Second Amendment, which is the right to bear arms. So those, and there were like several different ads, of course, but the important aspect is the specific targeting was done super, super efficiently. And some people would say, no, it's just an ad, it doesn't influence anything. But the scale at which it was done had an end result that had a strong influence on the election results. So it's always been the case. You will want, just like Cambridge Analytica or just like any politician, you will want to understand as much as possible about your customers, their decision process, and their experience journey. This is the essence of what we do in marketing. Understand the customer, understand what they do, the decisions they make. You will want to influence them at every touch point that you have with them. Build a trusting relationship so that those customers or potential customers actually choose you, and they want to do business with you and hopefully become advocates of your brand, which is a legitimate interest for any marketer. So you will want them to adopt your brand, become advocates. Maybe you will want them to vote for you. Even if you're not selling an election, they vote by purchasing your products. So Cambridge Analytica demonstrated the value proposition, which were based on not necessarily on the so-called P's of marketing. What we always hear, the P's of marketing: product, price, place, promotion, and then you will find plenty of articles that add other. Maybe there's 5 or 7 of them. I don't care, but this was based on the notion that marketing was able to play on those 4 dimensions to influence customers, potential customers, to choose their brand. So now it has changed into engagement, experience, exclusivity, feeling that you are special, and plays on emotions a lot. So there's a shift, something that was, I would say, very much product centric. So I'm trying to sell the product to someone, and we switch position, and now we're talking about customer centricity, or people centricity, and we want to engage with them. We want them, they, our customer want to live an experience. They want to feel special, and there's a lot of emotion in the choices they make and how they use the products. And it's not just the product; it's the whole experience with the brand. So, despite of all the science that is available, all the technology, um, there's always going to be room for creativity, and great ideas and bold ideas, which is great. That's why it's so exciting. Even if I'm a data guy, I hope, I'm very creative. Um, so we'll need to continue to balance between art and science. Some of it is uh, about not only making a good marketing campaign, because if you just do that, if you just follow the trends and the best practice and things like that, you will just do a good campaign. How you make an amazing campaign, something that is different, is through creativity. It's to go beyond what your competitors are doing. So I already mentioned two important words in marketing: trust and influence. Trust is the foundation, and the pressure to have transparent business processes, business practice, I should say, will just increase. So companies won't be able to claim they have some values. They will actually have to demonstrate and live those values. So the brands, when you think of it, think about all the brands that you like. There's some level of connection because you share common values. So it's time for another quick poll. So this time is about trust and Facebook. So do you trust Facebook? And trust is a very broad term. So now it's interesting because it's not just two possible answers. So we won't have an 80-20. Okay, results are coming in. Wonderful. And when I say, do you trust Facebook? I include into it Instagram and WhatsApp because they are owned by Facebook also. So in the end, all of your behavioral data, all of your profile, all of the likes and the shares and everything you do, they all end up in the same bucket of data that describes who you are in the face of Facebook. All right, so we have the results, and we can share those results, and we see that well, we still have almost 65% of you say that they don't trust Facebook. I don't trust them either. I really don't trust them. Their history, the foundation of even the beginning of Facebook was based on something that was, from an ethical standpoint, something that was unethical, which was, you probably know the story, rating girls on a scale of 1 to 10, solely based on picture. This is how Facebook started. It was just for fun, but and the history of Facebook demonstrates so many times that they have taken decisions that were unethical, sometimes illegal, and they got fined for that. The regulations, the laws if you look in Europe, GDPR, part of the changes of the GDPR stems from the abuse of companies like Facebook and others. Okay, so back to the presentation. So what happened when you lose trust? What happened is you will notice something like this: deciding which factor comes into play when you choose a brand. This is a survey that was conducted by Edelman, which is a big advertising agency that indicates trust is the second most important factor when purchasing a new brand. Of course, price is still number one, but you see that the gap between price and trust is actually not that big, and it tends over the year. It tends to become less and less important. Price is less important than trust gradually. So what happened when you lose trust? Something like this happened. The brands disappear. They don't matter anymore. Product differentiation doesn't matter. The only factor, it becomes the price. If there's no trust on an equal factor, all things being equal, the only factor becomes the price. And then of course it will go for the lowest price because trust is not there anyway. So this was a survey of 350,000 people conducted by Avas, which is another big agency. It revealed that people wouldn't care if 77% of the brands disappeared. And what's interesting in the case of this study is they've been doing it, I think, for 10 years. And this percentage is just increasing every year. So losing trust in your brand is once you lose it, what's the future of the brand? That's super important. So it's easy to see what a product or a business is doing. They are making shoes or T-shirts or chocolate bars. So it's easy to see what they are doing. It's fairly easy to understand how they are doing it. And that's why when you look at China and the level of, I would say, piracy, or they just replicate products. So they see what is being done and they do the same thing. Understanding how a company is doing it is a little bit more difficult because you have to understand what is the process behind it. But the most important, the most difficult aspect to replicate is why the company is doing it. And that is the culture, that is the spirit of the brand. And this cannot be replicated. That's why you have different brands of shoes. And even if the shoe itself might essentially do the same thing, the brand behind it is very different. So asking why or what for is a very powerful. I've been consulting for I don't know 20 years or something like that, and asking why someone is doing it or why a company is doing what they are doing is a very good way of finding out what are the core values, what is important to them. But it's also, if we bring it to a customer level, asking why a customer is doing what they are doing is also a super good way to be customer centric and improve the way you interact and you build trust with the customers. So this is exactly playing on the why customers are doing it is exactly what Cambridge Analytica did with the Ocean model, and in the end, building profile about 230 million Americans. So understanding why people do what they do is an essential role of any marketer. I actually met Christopher Wiley. That's why I was saying I have some exclusive information about Cambridge Analytica. I actually met the guy. He's an eccentric. He suffers from an attention deficit, gay. He was bullied when he was younger. He was a school dropout, but later completed a PhD related to fashion trends in London. He's a Canadian, by the way. He was born in BC. So he completed a PhD related to fashion trends in London, and then just for the fun of it, did a master in political management in Washington. So the guy is brilliant. So I met him face to face for about 45 minutes alone in a small, in the backstage room of this conference center. This was in Prague 2 years ago. It was a marketing conference with about 1,500 marketers in the room. So he told the story about Cambridge. But in order, my role was to do a Q&A with him. So in order to do that, I watched hours and hours of testimonials. I read everything I could about Cambridge Analytica. And the more I was reading about it, the more I was understanding the scale and the importance of this story, how it changed. It was a turning point for me. I was a data guy, really fascinated by the ability of using big data to create models, to target people, and so on. And now I'm still a data guy, but have a very, very strong interest for privacy and ethics. So it really shifted my role and my views of how marketing is leveraging data today. So I did the Q&A. The guy is awesome. You know, he was just really open about any questions, was willing to answer everything. But there was one question I wanted to ask him, and it ran so fast that I couldn't ask him. But the thing that always bugged me, and of course he probably won't say it publicly, but did he become a whistleblower because there was a journalist from The Guardian who was following him and hassling him and you know, really pushing for a year before he came out with the story? So did he come out with this as a whistleblower because he had some remorse, or because the journalist was going to come out anyway and he was feeling that the water was getting too hot? The guy, he is the mastermind behind Cambridge Analytica. He is the guy who really created the capabilities and the ideas to create Cambridge Analytica and be able to influence an election. So it's a little bit like, you know, Dr. Frankenstein lost control of his beast, and that's really what happened. So there's a documentary, and the proof that I was with him. Look at my face and look at his face. You know, I look much more happier than he does. You probably won't find any picture where he's really smiling, because I think the guy was really shocked, and it was almost like a post-traumatic syndrome of realizing that the good will and good intention, the brilliant idea he had in mind at first, was turned into something that really became evil. So there's a documentary called The Great Hack. And of course, you know, again, it's give and take. There's some aspects that might be amplified. And there's a book called Mindfuck from Christopher Wiley, where he tells the story in his own from his own perspective. So I think for anyone in marketing, any of those two, or at least understanding the story, should be required reading or watching or at least learning about the story, because that's going to influence. It's going to influence the way you make decisions in the future. So again, let me give you an example of what happens. So take the Nike brand. You might like it, maybe you don't care. Maybe you prefer Adidas to Nike or Puma or any other brand. But what they were able at Cambridge Analytica, when you learn about the story, you know that they were, in some case, they were financed by the U.S. Defense Department, and they did some research to help out the CIA. So the mindset of Cambridge Analytica was into really influencing politics, and they were the company that was the mother company of Cambridge Analytica was specialized into election management, which means anything could happen, including death and including things that are absolutely unethical and illegal. So there are proof that through when you do your research about Cambridge Analytica and the whole story. So back to Nike. So they found out that there's through the data, they found out that there's a relationship between Nike and Kit Kats. Don't ask me why. The data is telling it. So it must be true. There's a relationship that people who love the Nike brand or like the Nike brand and like Kit Kat tend to be more anti-Israel. So the way they put it is people who like Nike and Kit Kat hate Israel. The algorithm says that, the data says that, and brands. One of the things that Wiley told me, which I find very interesting, is he said, if you want to change politics, you first have to change culture, and brands are a reflection of culture. So the brand choices you make reflects your culture and reflects your political choices. So we make a link between those elements. And the way to influence those, remember the 4 E's I talked about: engagement, experience, exclusivity, and emotion. So according to Havas, they have defined 13 different attributes that you can play on, grouped under functional, personal, or collective benefits. So in there you have natural or emotional or social and so on. So those would be personal benefits and so on for the other ones. So that's an interesting, it's essentially, according to Havas, what you can play on in order to increase engagement, experience, exclusivity, a sense of exclusivity, and emotions. So at the end of the day, what does it mean? It means that it's about choices. Not only the choices your customers are going to make, but also the choices you will make and the actions you will take throughout your career. So let's do one last quick poll. This time, I'm curious to know what you think will have the greatest impact on your career and the future of marketing. So let's go with the last one. So which of the following aspects will have the biggest impact on the future of marketing? Great. All right, so we can stop the poll, and what we have is, again, almost an 80-20. 80% of you are saying that big data, data-driven marketing, automation, machine learning, and AI will have the greatest influence. Yes, it will have a big influence. Of course, social media, mobile, Internet of Things, and all those aspects, of course, will have a big impact. Employee shortage and lack of skills, only one person actually said that this is what I would have voted for personally. The future of marketing, in my opinion, and that's why I said maybe it's going to be a little bit controversial, but the future of marketing is not about the technology, big data, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. It's not about social media or some magical application or technology that will come up in the future. This is what big agencies and solution vendors would like you to believe. But in my opinion, the future of marketing is really about, it's really about you. It's really about your skills and the choices you'll make. Because even if the technology is there, this is something I've heard so many times, any technology can be used for good or evil. The way you use the technology depends on you, the choice you make, the values you have. So every year, the World Economic Forum looks at the future of work and identifies the skills of the future. So they break it down into self-management skills, problem-solving skills, technology use and development. So being able to use the right tools for the right purpose, and working with people. So let's look quickly, very quickly at each of them. Of course, the presentation is going to be available. So self-management is pretty interesting because it suggests that active learning and learning strategies. So I know you are into an MBA program, you want to get your diploma and everything. I'm sorry, but I've been learning for 35 years and I never stopped. So there's always going to be something else to learn about, which is great. That's what keeps me young. Um, the other aspect is resilience, stress tolerance, and flexibility. We're going through a pandemic, so I guess those aspects are skills are super important. And I would add my own grain of salt here and say that your sense of ethics will play a huge role in how you shape your future. When you do something, the easiest ethical test is to ask yourself, what would my mother think of it? If my mother was behind me and watching what I'm doing, would she agree or not? Or you can flip that, and when you have kids, you can say, in a couple of years from now, what will my kids, my daughter or my son, think about what I did or what I'm doing right now? And that's a super easy ethical test that you can do. Um, and maybe this kind of questions would have avoided something like Cambridge Analytica and what happened with the US election. The other aspect, of course, is problem solving, critical thinking, analysis, analytical thinking, complex problem solving. Those are all skills that are super important because regardless of what you learn in class, how you apply this knowledge will depend on skills like this: critical thinking, analytical thinking, and problem solving. But those skills also, they exercise the left side of your brain, but there's also room for the right side, the more creative side of your brain: creativity, originality, and initiative, and reasoning and ideation. So those are important skills also. The next dimension is about technology use and development. So that's where big data, machine learning, and all those aspects comes in. It's your ability to leverage technology to accomplish or solve the problems, the complex problems that you're trying to solve. And the creativity is being able to extend the knowledge you have and combining different ways of solving the problem to come up with a new creative solution. So technology use and design and programming. But as a marketer, it doesn't mean that you're going to have to actually code and do things like that. But if you think about marketing automation, for example, you have to, there's a certain level that can be automated. The tool itself will learn based on the data what it needs to do. But typically marketing automation, you have to sequence a series of action that will answer based on different things that your customers are doing. So there needs to be trigger, an action, and an outcome. And this is similar to actually programming. So you need to have those skills also. And the last one is about working with people. They suggest leadership and social influence, but I would also add communication skills. So all the other skills, analytical thinking, problem solving, and everything, won't get you very far unless you are able to communicate the outcome of your findings. So I think communication skills are going to be super important, be it communication like I'm doing right now through Zoom or face to face. Eventually, we'll get back to that, hopefully, or written communication, visual communication, like creating graphics and using data, creating visuals and stuff like that. So, in summary, I think marketing hasn't completely changed. The Kotler definition still makes sense to some extent, but it has evolved into and will continue to evolve. and will the importance of understanding, yes, the 4P is important, but understanding what are the 4Es is also important. With data at scale, technology, it's easy for a marketer to fall on the evil side of things, sometimes even without realizing it. I coached agencies and I worked with startups, and I witnessed cases where agencies were really, really doing things that were unethical, sometimes things that were illegal, without even realizing it. Because hey, the tool is there, the tools allow me to do it. Everybody is doing it, so why not? If I don't do it, my competitor is going to do it. So there's this pressure to do things that are pushing the limits of that really, really small, thin red line that will make you fall on the evil side of marketing. And you don't want to do that. So, so the unique value proposition of a brand isn't necessarily what it does, but it's why it's doing it. And in the past, the functional benefits used to differentiate different products and brands, but customers are now putting a much greater emphasis on personal and collective benefits. So in the end, you are the future of marketing. Maybe that's not what you were expecting. Maybe you were expecting some magical answer. This is the future, like go there and do this trick and this is the future. No, that's not how I see it. What matters the most, regardless of the program you're in or the specific classes you attend, are the problem solving skills, the critical thinking, the communication abilities, and all the other things I mentioned. Maybe like me, 40 years from now, you will look back and realize that the passion for your work will open unexpected doors. You're gonna have your own path in your career, and hopefully you're gonna be as passionate as I am 40 years from now. So that's it for me. We can open it for a few. We started a little bit late, so we might have a few time for questions. So let me stop the sharing. The presentation is, of course, going to be available. And I will share the links also.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you. It was really a great presentation. We had a lot of debates in the chat as well. Mm-hmm. I think we probably transfer all this interesting conversation so that you could answer it later. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I had a question for you. Mm-hmm. Regarding to the scandals that happens now, where should we put the ethical question in the process of buying? I mean, yeah, when a marketer is in front of an application with not fully ethical terms of condition, should we question ourselves, like, what is my value? Do I really use it, even if it works? Yeah, I read something that said ethics comes before the law, during the law, and after the law. Ethics tends to go further than what the actual law asks for. So being more transparent and being more what they call privacy by design oriented will always win in the long term, more than trying to find sneaky ways of saying, oh, the law forces us to say this, so let's just say the minimum, but leave the gray zone where it will give us the room to do the sneaky little things that we want to do. So I think this is true, especially true of when you do digital marketing, but also even when you create products, physical products also. It will, in the long run, it will improve quality, it will improve trust, it will improve engagement. So the sad thing is our economic system is built on the idea that you need to increase profit every quarter. So it's just looking at the short term. It's not looking at the impact in the long run, not as much at least. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. I think we're gonna end up here. We're running out of time that way. So
Yeah.
thank
I
you
could
very
go
much
on
for
and
being.
on, but
That's it.
what I can do,
But
I will take the chat,
yeah, but
and if there are some interesting questions, oftentimes what I do is I post a follow-up article where I try to answer some of those questions. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, you will see this popping up within a few days with additional thoughts and links and answering your questions.
I think it
Oh,
would be
yeah,
interesting. We have some people who are raising their hands, so maybe we'll take a few questions of them before
exactly.
we.
Exactly.
Oh,
We will
yes.
take time to answer everyone that who raised their hands on the Zoom. So let's begin with Tyson. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Hi, my name's Tyson. Thanks for that. That was very thought-provoking. I'd like to say it provoked happy thoughts. It didn't for me mainly. So my question is, I guess in the same line as the last one, how should marketers really take into account the negative externalities of the marketing strategies? For example, in advertising, we've seen, for example, lingerie, we see a wider range of bodies, ages, etc. What can we do for targeted marketing to be more ethical specifically?
Yeah, well, there's two aspects to that. One is initially when you do it, you don't want to do anything negative. You don't do it on purpose. So the only way to see if something you've done turns out to have some negative effects is to keep monitoring and watching and closely being aware of this can happen. So at least if you are aware that something might go wrong, you will be more receptive to those signals. So listening to what the data says, but also what the customers are saying. And we talk about social media. So one of the greatest things about social media is being able to listen to your customers. So this is still super important. The other aspect is targeting itself. Targeting is based on the notion that some players are collecting a ton of data, building profiles and segments that you as a marketer can exploit and say, those are the people I want to target. Because of privacy and regulations and a bunch of things, the notion of targeting is shifting. The way it's being done is becoming more contextual. And instead of targeting a profile, you target a context. And from a privacy perspective and an ethical perspective, it's much safer to say those are the contexts that I want to watch to reach. For example, someone purchasing a car, in the process of purchasing a car, will most likely go on a website that has car reviews and stuff like that. You don't target the person, you target the action in their customer life cycle where they're at. And this is much safer from a ethical perspective.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So we're going to take two more questions. So randomly, I will take, okay. Nadine Pinet from Asper. So you can go.
Merci Stéphane.
Oui.
So I've been thinking a lot about the erosion of trust in our institutions, especially in light of what happened just recently in the US. And we often think of marketing in terms of private enterprises and even political parties. But is there a place for the marketing of our institutions to help restore faith or trust, or at least fight against disinformation and misinformation? And what's the line, in your opinion, between those efforts versus propaganda, which would be the extreme?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, you've probably read, like everyone else, when you go on a website and you read something like the mission statement, and you read that, and it's, excuse me, but it's total bullshit. Right? It's one of those statements that says, oh yeah, we want to be the greatest in the world. you can say that, but you need to show that that's really what you're doing. I think there is absolutely room for institutions, organizations, governments, and so on to, well, their role, especially government, their role is to make sure they put the limits on what is acceptable from a society perspective versus what is not, and that's called the law. As a society, we decide what we accept and what we don't accept. The problem is it tends to lag behind the creativity of some rogue players that find ways to do stuff that always push a little further. So obviously there's a difference between private companies and the role of NGOs and government and so on. But marketing is important to both aspects. One is maybe selling physical items or digital items. The other one is, say, if we think about governments and NGOs, what they are trying to sell. I worked with some NGOs, and some of them didn't realize that they essentially had two aspects they needed to market. One was raising money, which is typically what they push for from a marketing standpoint. But the other aspect was they need volunteers. They need people to make it happen. And that was often the aspect that they forgot. They were doing all of the marketing in order to raise more money. But no, you need people to actually accomplish your mission. Government is a little bit similar. We need to trust our government. And again, trust is what? It's transparency. It's being open about what works and what doesn't work. So I don't know if that answers your questions, but I think there is definitely room for marketing in those organizations.
So we'll take one more question before we leave randomly. So let's go with Rachel Phillips. And for the other questions, you can put it in the chat bot, and I will transfer it to I think Stéphane. You will be happy to answer the questions afterward. So
to the best of my knowledge.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Stefan. This has been really wonderful. My question is just around the increase in privacy laws and how that is kind of spreading like wildfire through different countries, and those regulations are becoming more instilled and more in place. And my question to you specifically is, how do you foresee this shaping and changing targeted marketing and just marketing practices in general, because they do rely so heavily on the data that they collect from users? Do you foresee it shifting backwards, or do you see it shaping into something new?
Well, is it shifting backward? Maybe in some ways. What I've seen, what I've witnessed over the past 20 years, using data for analytical purposes. So trying to, from a marketing standpoint, trying to do attribution. So which of my marketing activities actually contributed the most to my outcome? And that was one of the promises of doing data analytics. You're going to be able to answer that. Or the famous 360-degree view of your customers. This, in my opinion, is another, excuse the term, bullshit that vendors tried to push down our throat, trying to make us believe that we would be able to have a perfect view of our customers. Well, the reality is, first, it will never happen, because there will, and I hope there will always be aspects of our customers that we don't know about. So hopefully but trying to have a clearer view of our customers is legitimate. This is first-party data in the sense that someone purchased something from you, you have an interaction, you build a relationship. Just make the parallel with our real life. You can go the Tinder way, where you base your decision on a picture, or you can go with a genuine relationship where gradually you're going to learn about the person and you build trust, right? It's very different goals that you have in mind. So definitely it will change. Those regulations will have a huge impact, maybe going a little bit backward at first, but eventually shaping into something different. I published things where I say, no consent, no tracking. And I think this is super important because there's a growing awareness of the level of privacy that we leave behind when we surf the web and so on. And a lot of people are pushing back and saying, no, I want my privacy. I don't want someone somewhere to be able to assume things about me just based on the behavior the way I surf on the web. So definitely it will have an impact. The safest approach, I think, going forward, look at GDPR in Europe. And it is, it gives the foundation, but it's also pretty complex because each of the countries that are part of the European Union or even extended, they might have some slightly different rules. So the safest approach for me is no consent, no tracking. Ask for it. Of course, if you want to ship something to someone, you need their name and address and they need to pay for it. So you need to have that information. But otherwise, when it comes to marketing using ad networks and so on, I think in the long run, the best approach is transparency, honesty, ask for it. And if you build trust, they will agree to share some of their privacy with you, and it will be good quality data that you can use.
Okay, so sorry again, guys, we're running out of time. Looks like we have to make another webinar just to answer all these questions.
I'm happy to come back. Just do a Q&A.
But yeah, we're collecting all the questions for you, and thank you for accepting our invitation, Stefan. We had a great time, and we wait for your feedback for all the answers.
Thanks to you. Best of luck for everyone enrolled into this great challenge, and I'll be happy to follow up if you have any questions. Thank you again.